everybody, and welcome to GenFriends. It's so good to have you here. We've got a great panel tonight. I am Cheri Hudson Passey from Carolina Girl Genealogy, and with me are Bernice Bennett from Geniebroots. Hey, Bernice. I can't even talk. Hi, Bernice. How are you? Tongue-tied, and we just got started. How you doing, Bernice?
Hi, doing wonderful.
I love your backdrop.
Thank you.
Great, from Maggie, and that's starting tomorrow, so that's going to date the show, but that's okay. So we're starting that tomorrow and excited for that. We've got Melissa Barker, our archive lady. Hi, Melissa.
Hello, hello. And I want to tell Bernice that I just listened to her interview with Tony Burrows, and it was excellent.
Isn't it fabulous?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it is fabulous.
It was fun.
Yeah, it sounded like
radio.
it.
Yeah, Blog Talk Radio for y'all that have not heard Bernice's show. It's fabulous. It's research in the archives and beyond. So I recommend it. Go listen to it. They're fabulous.
Is it over 300-400 different shows?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Just a few. She's just got a few.
Take you all the way back to 2012.
They're great to listen to. They're fabulous. We've got Shelly Murphy. Hi, Shelly Murphy, aka Family Tree Girl.
Good evening.
Glad
to be here.
I'm glad you're here too. Dan Earl, our family history guy.
Hello.
And our token male.
Right. Lone Y chromosome.
Exactly.
Yes.
So glad
That's
you're here.
Your new title.
Well, Mary Kircher Roddy is with us tonight from MKR Genealogy. And yes, she is one of our wonderful regular panelists, but tonight she is also playing a dual role. Mary recently received her certification in genealogy, so she is a board certified genealogist. And we thought that it would be a fabulous idea to, yes, clap. It's a lot of hard work. A lot of hard work. Mary is going to talk to us. I know I hear people asking all the time, what do you do? How do you become board certified? So we thought, let's ask Mary. she's here with us every week, and who else should we ask but Mary? So we're glad to have you here, and it's so fun to have someone on the panel that has her certification. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely a journey. You know, for the longest time, I wasn't going to get certified. I'm a certified public accountant, and what did I need more initials after my name for? But, you know, I saw a lot of people that were certified, and I thought, well, I'm as smart as she is. I'm as smart as he is.
Mary, that's my problem. I'm worried that I'm not.
You are. I'm sure
I get a little intimidated, you know, by the whole thing.
And I wanted to prove it, you know, mostly to myself that I'm as smart as that person. And so it really was a personal challenge. Some people do it because they want those letters after their name to, you know, up their stock as a researcher or speaker. For me, I mean, that was maybe a little bit of it, but mostly it was just, I kind of wanted to see if I could meet that challenge and see if my work met the standards and that people would say, yeah, I was doing it right. So, so I decided to submit for the Board for Certification of Genealogists. And in order to do that, and I want to say one thing before I go any further. I am a certified genealogist, but everything that I tell you is my thoughts. I'm not authorized by BCG to tell you anything. Whatever I say is just, I may be wrong. So really don't say, well, Mary said, because no,
that's your disclaimer from Mary Kircher Roddy.
So anyway, but you know, I think I'm roughly doing it right.
You passed. Of course you're doing it right.
So you put together a portfolio of different kinds of work samples. And this can all be found on the BCG website, and I'm sure that Cheri will put a link to it. There's the application guide that you want to follow, and that will tell you what you need to submit. And you submit, when you send in your money to BCG, you send in $75, and they will, and tell them what area you feel comfortable working in. and they will, and what era, and they will send you a document that you then transcribe and abstract and create, you analyze it and you come up with a research question based on that document and a research plan of what would be your 10 steps to answer that research plan. What kind of records would you use? So it's a really good exercise, and you get this document cold.
Well, you know,
And
Mary, I like what you said about the fact that you can say, you know, this is the time period I would prefer, the records, because it's not like they're trying to trick you. They're not.
no,
It's not like they're, let's see how hard.
You don't
She
say,
said
yeah.
she wants this time period.
Yeah,
Well,
I
we're
didn't
going
have
to
to
send her something
pick any,
else.
1720 document that I couldn't read.
Exactly.
I picked
that's a
something
good
I
point.
was sure I could read from
Right.
California after statehood, and and they sent me my document, and I couldn't read it. And I sat on my couch and I cried for about an hour because I had already done a ton of work for certification, and I thought, oh no, I have spent a year working on this portfolio, and they sent me this document, and I'm gonna fail because I can't read this darn page. So I cried for about an hour, and
then you put the big girl panties on and said,
Exactly.
"I'm reading this
It's
thing."
like, okay, I could read the name of that
Yes.
town.
Yeah.
I mean, I had this county that did not exist.
Oh,
At least I
gosh.
didn't think it existed. Once I knew the town in it, I could figure, oh yeah,
That's
I
what
can see
that
that county
says.
word. That's what that says. So anyway, and I was off and going. So you have to do that. You have to do a client project, a research report for a client. It has to be more than just a lookup, and it can't be like a lineage society application. You have to have a research question that they want answered, and then you
Right.
have to really demonstrate your skills, that you would know what kind of resources to cover for that, what you would look at, efficient use of your time.
Right.
You may or may not be able to answer their research question, and you have to assess, did I answer their research
Sure.
question?
Now, Mary, what if you don't take clients? Because I know there's people that say, well, I don't take clients, so how could I possibly do a client
Or
report?
why?
Yeah.
Right. And you don't have to take clients. I wasn't really taking clients as a rule. You can do one for your neighbors. You can do a pro bono one. You can go to your genealogy society and say, I'm willing to do 10 hours or 20 hours of work and write up a report for somebody. And so it can be, it does not have to be a paid client that you do.
And it
Can it be
doesn't
It
your
can't
own
be someone
family?
in your own family.
Right.
Okay.
So,
and it doesn't have to be some really hard. I think sometimes people think, well, I've got to pick the hardest question anybody was ever had to, I mean, you need to show that you know how to research, but I think sometimes people overthink what they have to do for a client report too.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah.
could be something that this lady said she was married twice on the census, and
Yeah.
who was the first husband, or something
Right.
like that. It doesn't have to be a super difficult question.
Yeah.
But it can't be your family, and it has to be, you want to demonstrate your skills. Would you know what kind of records to look at to find who the first husband of that lady might have been?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. If
Yeah.
it can't be your family, but what if you're determining if that is your family?
You should, well, how are you determining that?
Well, and again, I'm trying to, and as an example, say I'm trying to determine if this is my third great grandfather.
No, it has to be a research report for a client. Has to be their research question, and you can kind of guide their research question. That if they say, I want to know who the seventh great grandfather of my seventh great grandfather is. Well, maybe we won't pick that one. What about?
Let's start from where you are.
Right. So, but it's got to be for a client. So you can't ask
Even if
your
you
own
don't
question.
take
What
a
you were
client, so you
right.
do it pro
Right.
bono.
So
Okay.
ask your neighbor. I love doing genealogy. Can I help you? Is there something that you would like to know?
Yeah. Okay.
So I did the ProGen study course, And I think we've talked about ProGen a little bit on the group. And that one, the assignments in ProGen mimic some of the BCG assignments. So, you know, on that one, my sister's husband's daughter from his first marriage, she had a question about her family. So it's not really my family at all.
Yeah.
And I did that just as my ProGen research report, but it was a really good test for, you know, trying to do a client research project. And I almost did some follow-up research for her for my certification project, but I ended up going with a different one. So you do your research report, then you need to do a case study where you're solving some sort of complex evidence problem. It can be indirect evidence or conflicting evidence, but you can't use something where there's a piece of direct evidence that will solve the problem. So I guess I'm going to say my little tip would be to do conflicting evidence, because that conflict is always going to be there.
Yes.
But if you write the whole thing up on indirect evidence and then you find the smoking gun that's the direct evidence, well, that work is all yeah, you shot down the
So
tubes.
doing the conflict evidence you felt was a good path.
Exactly. That, yeah.
Good path.
Good,
And you
good
know,
path.
you think about it, it sounds kind of intimidating, but we're all researchers. You can't tell me everybody on this panel has not had a case that they've been trying to solve with conflicting, you know, they've had conflicting evidence. So think about that. You can do
And it has to be a
And
little
you
bit
might not solve it, so that still would show your skill.
yeah.
for the case study. You have to solve it.
You have to solve it.
Ah,
Um,
and that's totally separate from the client report.
right, right.
Okay.
These are all different elements of the portfolio, and they demonstrate different skills. So, you know, with a client report, you have to be very efficient because you're spending somebody else's money on, in general, if you do client research on that project.
Right.
So you've got to know what are the top things that I got to look at to be able to solve this. It might not be reasonably exhaustive research on your client report. And you will get them close to an answer. You'll get them an answer, and you can then say, you know, this is what it is, but I would also look at these other things to verify.
Right.
But with your case study, you have to solve the problem. And I did a case study for ProGen, and it was about a guy who used 2 different names. And I submitted that to NGSQ, and I got some feedback on that, and I learned about some techniques and some strategies that I hadn't really used, and so I had to clean up that article and do a little bit more research before NGSQ was willing to print it. But I really learned a ton about men who use 2 different names.
That's funny.
So I found
Bernice,
another guy.
oh, sorry. I was going to
Yeah.
say, Bernice has a question. I thought
Yeah,
maybe we-
Bernice.
Yes, Mary, just outline for us your timeline. How long did it take from the time you made the decision that you wanted to become certified, and give us all your steps until you became certified?
Okay, so for me, it was
I
about
want it all.
for me, it was about a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and some people will send in their preliminary application to BCG and be on the clock, as they say. And you get a year on your preliminary application and to turn in your portfolio. If you're not done, you can extend for another $75, and you can extend multiple times. And some people, I think, have extended a couple times at least.
or more.
I didn't need that pressure. So, and I was getting my writing done, getting my research done, and I didn't go on the clock really till I had solid drafts.
So I think that's
my
really important to know,
research
Mary,
report.
that
Yeah.
you can do that you can
Yes,
get your stuff done
right.
ahead of time and then go on the clock.
I could do everything except for the BCG document. You
Yeah.
don't get that until you send in
Yeah.
your application, and then they send it back to you. So that was why I cried, because I'd spent a year writing this whole darn portfolio, and and I had a 70-page kinship determination project, which I'll tell you about, and I had a 25-page case study and a 25-page client report, and I couldn't read the 2-page stupid document.
You just gotta know that flair of those letters.
Yeah,
If it
so
was 1702, it's the
So
letter.
Mary, did they send you another document, or you just
I bucked up,
after you
and
cried, you figured
after
it
I
out?
cried, I figured it out,
Yeah.
and it was
Every
okay.
P is an S.
Yeah.
That's the one letter I
Yeah.
know.
So anyway, so I was on the clock for about a year, or not on the clock for a year, sorry. I started working on my portfolio really probably July of 2018. And I wrote my KDP, I wrote my case study. I was doing more research and finally found somebody that would be a client. They actually paid me a little bit of money.
Good.
And so I did a little bit of research for them, and so I had a client report. That was probably the hardest thing, is because you don't ever want to turn in the first that you've done of anything. So you really ought to practice with a couple different clients, and then kind of judge which of those would be the best to turn in. So I did that, and then I went on the clock on my birthday in 2019. That was kind of what I said, how I said I would spend my birthday. So I sent in my application. I got the document from BCG a day or two later. It's all done by email, so everything's pretty quick. Finished that, cleaned up the portfolio, cleaned up my citations. In the middle of April, I was all ready to turn it in. I'm really anxious to turn it in because I was so tired of having done all this research, and you really aren't supposed to get any help from anybody, so you really try not to talk about it, so you don't get anybody's opinions. Well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So you want to keep it your own work. It definitely has to be your own work, and you attest to the fact that it's your own work. And I wanted to talk about it. I was just, I had cool stuff, and I really wanted to talk about it. So middle of April, I was ready to turn it in, but I knew I was going to NGS, the National Genealogical Society Conference, and BCG has a booth there and has portfolios, and so it's just like, hold your horses, Mary, just go look at those portfolios one more time, listen to the BCG lectures at NGS, and just make sure. So I did, and it was a great timing for me. I had everything done. It was all really fresh in my brain. So I went to a lecture, and then I'd come back, oh, I need to change that. And I'd go back up to my hotel room that night, and I would change a little. Or I would go look at a portfolio and say, judges didn't like that, because you can look at portfolios and you can look at, they have a binder of judges' comments, and I could look at those and say, oh, the judges don't like it when you do that. I did that. I better get rid of that. And so I cleaned it up, and those few days at BCG, and I got home Saturday night, and Sunday I cleaned it up and I got ready to submit. And Monday after NGS, I submitted. And I found out in July that I had passed.
So great. And now, Mary, you mentioned a couple of times the KDP. So for anybody watching that doesn't know what a KDP is, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
The KDP is a kinship determination project, where it's a 3-generation lineage. And you need to prove the linkages between the generations. So in 2 different generations, just one relationship. So I proved that my great-grandfather, Charles Conrad Kircher, was the son of Charles Conrad Friedrich Kircher. And then I proved that my grandfather, Charles Kircher, was the son of Charles Conrad Kircher. And it doesn't have to be a super complicated proof. It can be, but I had, a probate record and marriage record and obituaries and other things that really linked the generations and showed that these people were that. So that you have to do that. And then you need to set the people that you're talking about in their time and place. And so I had immigrants from Germany, and I talked about life in Germany, and then they went to New York and they became farmers, and what they grew and what their life was like. And then, my down through the generations. And my grandfather was a marine engineer on a ferry boat in San Francisco Bay. So I talked about small town life in Tiburon and what it was like raising his kids during the Depression and World War II. And so you kind of set them against the backdrop of history. And even, I'm going to say, even if you have no interest in becoming a CG, no interest in doing a portfolio, write a KDP as if expert professionals in the field would be judging it. I looked at records that I wouldn't have ever looked at. But I wanted to make sure that I covered everything. And I found out things about my grandfather, my dad's dad, that I don't think he knew, because my dad told me a ton of stuff about his dad. But I found my grandfather's, his school records. He went to Dartmouth. And my dad knew he went to Dartmouth and knew what he studied at Dartmouth. But I found a Dartmouth catalog that said my grandfather did a year in medical school at Dartmouth. And my grandfather didn't become a doctor. And I don't think my dad ever knew that. I can't wait to get to heaven to ask my dad that. Did you know?
Did you know? And if you did, why did you never tell me?
I know.
And granddaddy is smiling down. See, told you.
And I think my conjecture is that my grandfather had 4 years at college and then had a younger brother who was 4 years younger. And his father said, "You've had your turn. It's Irving's turn now. We're not paying anymore." And he couldn't afford to go to school. So it was his senior year in college that he also did first year medical school. Didn't ever end up becoming a doctor. And but I never would have found that if I hadn't been trying to find every single thing I could find.
That's
I know what kind of grades my grandfather even got at Dartmouth.
Oh, well, that's great. Shelley's got a question.
Yeah, Shelley.
Yeah, once you submit, it's reviewed.
Yes.
And I know, and again, there's perceptions, there's even myths, and then I have my own opinion.
All right, let's hear all of
I'm putting
them.
that out clear. I applaud people that go for certification. I also know, just like you said, it's not anything that you have to do, or even if you're not taking clients, but it's also a learning process for you as well, and be it a challenge for you or whatever. Because I thought about doing it several times, but it was the other stuff around me that said, don't do it, or I don't need it. Because I had been taking clients, and I got the degrees, got that stuff, and it was like, what is it going to do for me? So I always look for different methods of doing things, because that's my degree stuff, and my business and my world and my work history is the methodologies and the challenges. So one of the biggest things that's always held me back, and I'm saying that because I'm sure there's other people thinking the same thing. Okay, who's judging me on what I do or how well? And is it somebody that knows me? So I know you can clarify that, because I've been told, and this is one of these perception things too, that they're specifically selected, and people know whose report that is that they get. So I'll say, as an example, I submitted a report and it's going to somebody that knows me. Oh, I know what she does. That's good. Or maybe it's somebody that maybe I made mad and they see it. So again, the perceptions and the myths. So if you could clarify that, because I actually even put in and paid the $75 probably about 10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And then I backed out because all this other stuff didn't seem right. And I thought, maybe it's not the time for me to do this, or maybe it's not anything I need that's going to enhance. So strike out those two motivations, Mama Mary, to say, you can do this. Yes, it's a chance. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I also will put that on me because there's only a handful of African-American
True.
certified genealogists.
So
and
true.
so that was another barrier that I thought I'm going to have to hoop over because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get labeled as the African-American researcher, which I am. And as a specialist, but you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
again, is the door open for everybody? I guess is another way of saying that.
I will say that the door is open for everybody. The president of BCG is LaBrenda Garrett Nelson, who is an African-American genealogist.
Which just happened.
Yes.
Just happened. Yeah, she's been president since last fall, maybe September or
Yeah, a few
October or
months.
something. Yeah. So there are rubrics, and you can find the rubrics on the BCG website. And I encourage everybody to look at those. You know, even if you are not submitting a BCG portfolio, even if you're just submitting a report to your client, run it against the BCG rubrics for a research report, because it gives you the standards and the book genealogy standards.
Got them.
You know, it tells you which ones apply to which thing. And in the rubrics for BCG portfolio, it will tell you what meets standards, partially meets standards, and does not meet standards. So compare your work, whatever it is that you're doing, to those standards, and try to really attain in your own mind that you have a meet standards. And it's not, you don't need to be 100%. You don't need to pass, you don't need a perfect score. There are, you know, for each of 8 or 10 different criterion, accuracy and, you know, reasonably exhaustive research. And for each element of the portfolio, there are standards and there are descriptions in it that you can see exactly what it is that you will be judged on.
So they're telling you exactly what you're going to be judged on, but we don't know who the judges are.
Right. The judges do have your name. They know who you are.
They do.
I thought they
one of those
didn't.
perceptions and one of those myths, because I was always told that they did not know,
Yeah,
and
that's
that
what
was
I'd
the
heard.
whole argument, is that no, they know because they only let so many people through. And I'm not knocking anybody's value in what they've done. This is how it, and I want that to get clear, because I was told that they don't know.
Okay, I think they know, but I can't say that for sure. I thought that they knew. So if you've heard something different, but I believe that the judges know. And I believe that the judges are told if you don't feel that you can judge this person's portfolio. The judges are BCG certified genealogists. I do know that. So if they've had a bad run-in with you and they are
I've had a few
upstanding, they could say, I don't feel comfortable judging this portfolio. Or if they have mentored you, and they could say, I know her too well. I'm not comfortable judging.
And see, I have a distant relative that I asked to be the mentor to go through the cycle. And then I thought, there's too many things telling me don't do this. You're okay. That, you know, and had one of the best mentors out there, and everyone on this panel knows this woman's name, and she is Miss Virginia with her hat on, and that's all I'm going to say. And so again, I had asked her, because I was, and this is about 10, maybe 10, 12 years ago, And again, because I thought it was something I needed to do because I was building the business.
Right.
And
right. Exactly.
and then when I settled that that's not going to be the business, because the day job, was keeping the medical bills paid and the mortgage paid. So, and I backed out, but I had a hard time with the myths and some of the attitudes. And I'm trying to be as honest and as professional as I can, but it was a hard plug for me to make that decision because some people will run it down your throat that you did this wrong and you're not certified in this, that, and the other. And so that was another thing that backed me up. I love having standards to follow. I think it's the route to go. And you guys know that for me, just making people do timelines. I like the orderly fashion of things, in that
I
context.
think, Shelley, I think it just comes down to what is right for you.
Yeah.
And for some people it's the right thing to do. For some people, I mean, for me, if I ever,
it's the timing
got off
too.
my, do I want to, do I not want to? It would simply just be for me to say I did it for myself. It would have nothing to do with I'm better than anybody else because I got the CG, or, it would just be for me to know that I'm doing things the way I'm supposed to be doing them.
Or the way they set the standard up.
Well, if I pass the rubrics, and I've read the rubrics, and the rubrics are pretty, I mean, they just follow the standards of genealogy research. So there's nothing strange or weird or why do I have to do that? It's what we need to do as, professional genealogists or non-professional genealogists that want to do the best research we can. We don't necessarily have to get that initial behind our name, but I liked Mary's idea of just going to the BCG website and checking out those rubrics and just see, oh, I'm already doing this, or I can learn how to do this. And that's another thing that I've heard too, is that, as you're being judged, and there's 3 separate judges from what I'm understanding, that look at your portfolio, and it can go to a 4th judge if there's, if there's some issues, but and then I just lost my train of thought.
Well, it is a choice, and I think that's the best way. And I
look at that and see, and there's no right or wrong, is what I'm trying to say. There's no right or wrong as to whether you want to do it or not. But I think for a lot of us, just looking at those rubrics, and all those links will be in the chat. So
okay.
We'll put all that in there.
Well,
so
I appreciate your opinion on that, Mary, because it was encouraging, and I just always felt I don't need that additional pressure on me.
Yeah.
Thinking I was never good. I've got the doctorate. I do research for the job, and I do very good genealogy research.
Sure.
And then I question, well, should I do it? Should I not do it? Not one client has ever questioned me about a certification.
So really, like you said, just do it for yourself. Just, that's what I would recommend.
It's totally a personal choice. And,
yes.
And I'll tell you, I mean, I love having done it. I learned a ton about my family. I learned a ton about research.
Mm-hmm.
My ProGen case study, I said I submitted it to NGSQ. My BCG case study was another different guy, also using somebody who used 2 different names.
She had a lot of that in her family.
Yeah. So I really learned how to do it. And that was a really good problem for me when I saw another one. It's like, okay, I got this one nailed.
Yeah.
So I felt my research on it was very strong. So I was very comfortable submitting that as my BCG case study.
Mm-hmm.
Right after I submitted my portfolio, I submitted that to NGSQ. And I had a ton of stuff I had to fix on that first case study that I submitted to them. I could think about this and that and that and that. And when I submitted my BCG case study, could have been different reviewers, whatever.
Yeah.
But I didn't have nearly so much to fix. And that said to me, you have learned a ton, Mary Roddy, in this process.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful learning experience.
I know what I was going to say about the judges, and when they you were talking about how you don't have to have everything perfect. if they feel like, well, this is not perfect, but she can learn how to do that, or he can learn how to do that, they'll just go, you can learn how to do that.
Right.
It could
If we tell them they made a mistake, will they not do it next time?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not, I don't think it's like you didn't do this correct and you didn't do that correct. What they want is a lot of, from what I've heard from other people, is a lot of it's consistency, say in your source citations. Are they consistent? Are you doing it the same way all throughout? Are you following reasonably exhaustive research? Those types of things. So, for me, those judges' comments would probably kill me, but but I mean, take those as a learning experience.
Yeah.
We all went to school. The teachers graded us and
I know APA.
just and taught us.
I
right.
dare someone to challenge me on that. It's the same way.
Yeah.
It's just rerouted because someone else
Sure.
developed it for genealogy. I get
Sure.
that. I
Sure.
still stick with my APA
Yeah.
no matter
Works
what.
works for
It
you.
works for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else got a question about the process?
Well, that's one of the questions I want to ask Mary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mary, you mentioned that you were part of Pro Genealogy, and
Uh-huh.
you studied with them, and you also got feedback from the queue. But if you had to do it all over again, what would be your preparation process?
I would do ProGen. I think it's a wonderful program. It's like $100. It is one of the best bargains in
ProGen 1
genealogy.
here.
Yay.
was in the first one.
And I am actually a ProGen mentor now. ProGen invites AGs and CGs to be a mentor of a group. And so I was asked to do it. And I'm having a gas at it because I'm learning from my ProGen, the ProGeners. So I'm seeing a whole bunch of new stuff, and it's like super cool. So I would do ProGen. Once you go on the clock for BCG, you can be part of the action list, which is a question list for people who are on the clock and trying to work on their portfolios. And if they have questions, they can ask. Somebody, Laurel Batty, on that is a certified genealogist, and she has compiled a bunch of statistics about people who did this, that, and that as preparation. What were their pass rates compared to people who didn't do it? So people who have attended institutes and people who have done ProGen are typically much more successful than people who have not had those kind of formal educational programs. There are more ways to do that. And there are people that haven't done it and have passed, but they are few in number. Because I think part of it is if you've done those kind of things, you recognize what preparation looks like, and you know whether you're prepared or not. People who haven't done that think they're ready, and maybe they're not. And so they submit anyway. And so that kind of brings the statistics down about passing or not passing. I would suggest that, you attend institutes, read good genealogy, read the NGSQ, study the NGSQ. If you go to any of the major conferences, and unfortunately we're in not a great year that nothing's live. I was going to say
that we can't see.
But you can look at portfolios, and you can look at successful portfolios. And I think but I'm not sure whether they have unsuccessful portfolios.
I don't know. But the problem is when we're all virtual, we can't look at
we don't
them,
get to see
and
that.
That's
but
a little
they do
frustrating.
have testimonies of people that had to go back and do it 2 or 3 times.
And there are people, Judy Russell had to go back again. I mean, so it's not like if you fail, you're in this.
Judy did.
Yeah,
no,
Judy did. Judy, yes, she did. Judy, because I've been in a class with her when she said, she says because she came at it like a lawyer, like an attorney, like from a legal standpoint when she needed to back up. And you know.
Because we were at the Institute at the National Archives together, and she was working on that submittal. I was
Yeah.
working on my dissertation, and
Yeah.
I thought, look, I got enough over here.
You
I'm
got
not
enough
thinking
over here.
about getting this.
So Mary, I was also going to bring up Jill Morelli's class.
Yeah.
That's a
So
fabulous class.
Morelli?
Jill Morelli
Jill.
Mhm.
teaches a certification discussion group,
Mhm.
and she goes one class for each element of the portfolio.
Mhm.
And she's kind of really nuts and bolts about what does the BC application guide say,
Yep.
what do the rubrics say, what do the standards say about this, that, and the other.
Mhm.
And I took her class too, and it was very, very helpful.
Yeah.
You know, suggestions. And I
Sure.
think that was probably the do the conflicting evidence case study.
Well, also,
Um,
what I found when I took her class, what I found helpful was there are other people that have given parts of their portfolio to share. You can see some actual judges' comments when you wouldn't, see those normally unless you're, at a conference or something like that. But
Right.
she's got them in the class for you to look at, and it's really helpful. And she'll have the people whose portfolio it is talk about. This is what the judges said, and this is what I learned from it. And why did this judge say this? But this judge said it was good. This judge said it was bad. That's why they've got more than one judge, because everybody looks at things differently. But her class is really good too. So if you're thinking about going on the clock, that would be a really good class to take too. It's really, really good. And I'll put the link in so that you can find that. But it fills up really fast. So if you see her offering it again and you want to take it, jump on it, because it
and
fills up
she's
really
not,
quickly.
she started the program, and she has a couple of other people that
Mm-hmm.
are teaching it as well.
Helping out
Their
now.
kind of their
Mhm.
experience. So,
Yes. Yeah.
So you might not have Jill's, or there are people that took it once from Jill and once from somebody else who taught it, just to
Yeah.
kind of get that additional perspective. So,
Exactly.
um,
Exactly.
you can't ask anybody to comment on your portfolio. You can't get feedback from anybody before you submit it. It has to be your own work, and you have to sign a paper that says that this is your own and you've not gotten feedback or advice on it. But that's not to say that you can't, write up a different family in a KDP and ask for feedback on it, and
Right.
kind of
So,
to help you
how am I
learn
doing
what
on my
you're,
KDP?
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
is this the right way to do this?
Yeah.
So, as much as you can practice your genealogy writing
Mhm.
and get feedback on it in general, that will help you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that I know it intimidates a lot of people when they think about even thinking about going on the clock, which is just what it's called when you've submitted your application. You've gone on the clock. But I know for me, it was especially when I started hearing about the process. It was very intimidating. It's just this certain little group of people that can pass this. But then as I've learned more and gotten more education, I found that any of us on this panel could easily submit and maybe not easily in the way that we could do it, because we know what we're doing. Easily, the writing, it takes a long time. But yeah, we can do this.
So I want to say one thing about intimidation.
Yeah.
Seriously, after I passed, I mean, if I was talking to genealogists, I could hardly speak, because I'm thinking, oh, now they're expecting this, and I'm still really only here. And I mean, I passed in last July. I went to SLIG in January,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in some ways afraid to raise my hand in class, thinking, oh, they're going to know I'm a CG, and I'm going to ask this really stupid question. So,
or answer something wrong. That would be my thing. I'd answer something wrong.
And I just had to just suck up, and I'm still, I know more than I did 5 years ago, and I'm still learning, and that's kind of where I am. So
Now that's not the end. You know, you get your certification, but if you want to keep it, you have to renew, right? Every 5 years.
Every 5 years.
And is that process as hard? Is this many steps, or you don't
That's a
know because
fun
you
one.
haven't done it?
I have seen some renewal portfolios, and it's not as complicated. You have to turn in some work samples, and 1 to 3 work samples, and I looked at a couple when I was at SLIG, a couple renewal portfolios, just because I wanted to know what it would be like. And so some people turned in, articles that they'd had published in GSQ or other things, or some people turned in client reports.
I gotcha.
So it's not the strictures about don't breathe a word of any of this to anybody out there, which is kind of what the scuttlebutt seems like for the initial portfolio.
Yeah.
Is not, those strictures aren't really so much for
the renewal.
renewals.
Yeah. Okay.
But you also have to, you'll have gotten comments from your initial portfolio from the judges, and some will be good and some will say you did this and this wrong. And so you definitely want to demonstrate
that you've learned something.
I'm not doing that wrong anymore. See. And maybe, and you will undergo continuing education.
Sure.
And so maybe you took a class in citations because maybe yours weren't quite up to snuff, or demonstrate what it is that you've done to remediate some of your not quite good skills.
Right. I was thinking about Shelley was talking about her citations and the way she does them. I recently heard from somebody who got their CG that didn't use ESM. She happens to work for Ancestry, so she used what they use, and they were fine with it because it had all the information and it was consistent. They don't want one kind here, then one kind here. They
that's
need
a shock, but I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, they just want it to be consistent. And so, girl, you're probably fine. So,
Melissa, you had a question?
Sorry, Melissa.
Oh,
thank you, Shelley.
No, you were talking about being on the clock, and it just dawned on me. I wondered, did you keep up with how many hours it took you to do what you did over the long haul?
Yes, you did.
There's a lot of things in my life I don't want to know anything about. How much I spent for my kids' private school tuition? No, thank you. It just came straight out of my bank. How much time I volunteer for, charity accounting? I don't really want to know. And how much time I spent on my application? It's like
she does.
So you don't have to. So you don't have to keep up with it then.
No. But one thing that was interesting. I mean, I did have a bit of a feel for it. You need to do reasonably exhaustive research, and you'll look at a death index, and it will tell you that somebody died, and you'll have the death date. But you really need to get the certificate because there may be something on it. The index may be wrong.
Right.
But you wind up spending a lot of money. $21 a pop for death certificates in Marin County, California.
Oh gosh.
I mean, I went in there one day and got 5, and the clerk behind the counter was like, you do know how much that costs, don't you?
Wow. And they're dead.
That was good.
But I looked at how much time I had spent.
Yeah.
And am I going to let $20 or $100? And I'm sure I spent hundreds of hours on that portfolio. And am I going to not pass because I wasn't willing to spend a little bit of money?
Yeah.
And to me, the answer was no. So I don't know. I didn't want to track how much I'd spent on certificates and records. And I didn't want to track. That's just the way I am. Do it and forget it. But
well, I can just see it's just, such a great learning experience. I mean, yes, it's got to feel terrible when, your portfolio comes back and you didn't pass. That's why, folks, if I ever decide to do this, you will never see an announcement from me that says, hey, I just turned in my portfolio. No.
No, I remember someone else that did that and put it out there that they finally were going to do it. Then he I haven't heard another word.
And see, that would be my thing.
Yeah.
I
I don't want to tell anybody.
No, I would do it, and I that's just my personality. For a lot of people saying, you know,
Yeah.
they just want to put it out there, and that's fine. I'm like, yay for you, but for me personally, it'd be very, very difficult for me to put
But
that
you'll
out.
tell us, right?
I might.
Yeah, when we're not recording.
Yeah, I might trust
Like
That's
the
right.
DAR.
you people.
She hasn't gotten there yet.
No, but I'm
YouTube's
working.
dead.
I'm working on it. A little bit.
Mine
at a
is sitting in
time.
Washington, D.C.
I'm
as we
so
speak.
proud
I'm
of you.
waiting.
I'm so proud of you. See, we've got this support group here, so maybe that's what everybody needs is a support group. Dan, you've been awful quiet tonight.
I have. I just keep thinking that if, not if, when I get my CG, that I will be the opposite of Cheri. I will make my own children refer to me as Dad CG. They have to include my post-nomials. If I'm going to put in the amount of work that Mary is referring to, my children will refer to me as that. When they bring their dates over, they'll be like, "Hi, Mr. Earl." I'm like, "That's Mr. Earl CG. Thank you. Please show some respect."
Dan,
I think there's a few people that already do that. So, you know, come up with something better than that. Come on,
Right?
Dan.
Yeah. It's not that I
Going
wouldn't
on
let
your
people know.
Put it right here.
Right on his gravestone. It's not like I wouldn't let people know afterwards. It's just that
Right.
no way am I telling
Gonna wear
anybody.
that
Number one,
badge
I
of
wouldn't tell
honor.
anybody that I was going on the clock because it's going to probably
No.
it'd probably take me 3 or 4 renewals to actually get to where I want to be, because it seems like every time life gets in the way, it seems like every time I've thought about I'm going to do this, I'm going to get started, something happens, and I don't have the time to devote to it. And so one of these days I'm just gonna do it and get married.
Well, and you can write those pieces and just have them in the can and ready to
Yeah.
go when you are ready.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I like that fact too, that you can
yeah.
it's not like they say you've got to prove that you only started this the minute you got on the clock. I like the fact that you can do it ahead of time. So
I think the clock will get me.
yes, Dan.
So with that, if you are working on things in advance, how often have they changed components of the process?
That's a great question.
That is a good question.
Because for some of us that may be a little bit younger than some other folks on the panel,
You call it
Oh,
old.
man.
So if, say, I waited until my birthday, I would have 19 years or so to work on these things. So,
He's gonna wear it here. CG right on the
Little
CG.
whippersnapper.
He's gonna wear something else if he's not
Right.
careful.
So I don't. The serious part of my question is, how often does it change? So if we are working on something and it's 5 years down the road, I mean, I have small children.
Right.
Things are going to happen.
Yep.
And it may be a while, but I don't want to start on this. Then they go, well, now we need this. Are they going to add a DNA component? Are they going to add, like, what is it? How often does it change?
They actually subtracted something recently. When I was preparing for it, you get your BCG document, but then you also had a document of your own choosing that you needed to do the same kind of document work on: transcript, abstract, research question, and analysis and plan. Shortly after I submitted, they dropped the personal one and only had the BCG one. So that did, drop one element to the portfolio. I guess they figured they could see enough of what your skills were for that part.
Yeah.
Just in the BCG supplied one. They have changed. The genealogy standards has added some new standards for DNA components.
Right.
The BCG is very clear right now that there is not a requirement that you include DNA in your portfolio. I can't say
some of
that
this is really good.
And
I'll just hire somebody.
It may be a matter of what you choose to do, and how you choose to say. In my case study, it was one guy using 2 names, and could DNA prove that? if the guy, after he finally got married under the second name and his wife had children, yes, I could have used that DNA to prove it that, you know, to his family of origin, and that even though he's using the fake name, he's related to it.
Right.
He and his eventual wife did not have children. This guy did have children, out of knocked up 2 women. And that's how we first found him.
I'm going to read the story.
It's a great story. But that's but I wasn't going to include that evidence in the, about these 2 earlier, out of wedlock births. And so I just said, he didn't have any children, so there is no children with his wife. So there's no way to prove that Charles Melville and Charles Olin were the same person using DNA. So I addressed that I knew it could potentially be a solution to the problem. So they could change it, they could require it, but
not every case needs it. So
Right,
that wouldn't make sense to say you have to do DNA, because
Right.
then people would be looking for only cases that had to have DNA, and that would be kind of stressful.
Right.
You know,
You know, and if you're trying to prove that somebody served in the Civil War or
Don't-
something for a
yeah.
client report, do you really need DNA for that?
No,
You know,
absolutely.
so
Yeah,
there's a lot of things where DNA doesn't apply.
exactly. Are there any more questions? This has been really fun, and I'm hoping that everybody, you know, watching and listening has gotten an idea of, you know, how to go about getting your certification, and that it's not that pie in the sky, only, you know, this little percent of people can actually make it. I mean, it's wonderful. Mary, I'm so proud of you that you put on this it's hard work. Yes, it's very, very hard work, but it's not something that you can't try. Everybody watching can't at least, you know, look up those rubrics and apply that to your research that you're doing. And hopefully we've made it a little less scary. So anybody watching that was maybe on the fence, maybe some of us on the panel, on the fence.
You will learn a ton about being a genealogist, and you'll learn a ton about, you know, if you choose to use your family in some of these elements, you'll learn a ton about your family. So there's definitely satisfaction from doing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any more questions? Are we?
Was your DAR stuff a little bit easier? Or you already had that compared to the process for your either client report or your case study?
The DAR stuff I think is much easier because
I was thinking the same
the
thing.
DAR is only looking really for one thing.
Straight up.
And you know, I mean, you're basically filling in the blanks. You're not really writing.
Follow that blood and prove it.
So, and you know, and for my DAR application, I don't think I had a death certificate for my grandmother, so I used her obituary.
There you go. Yeah, and you couldn't do that, and you can't do that.
And I could get that for free out of the newspaper.
Right. So. Yeah. Well, thank you, Mary. Thank you so much for, like I said,
guys for having
and
me.
Yes, and congratulations. Just what a, you know, what a wonderful thing, you know, to have that CG behind your name, and the learning process and all that comes with that. So we congratulate you for doing that. And I'm hoping that you've encouraged me and
me too,
and other
you guys
and other people that, you know, have thought about it. Just get out there and take a look at the BCG website and the rubrics, and see if it's for you. It may not be. You know, everybody's different, and everybody has different goals. But if you've thought about the CG program and thought about doing it, that's why we made this show. That's why we did this tonight. Hope to answer some of your questions and encourage you to take a look and see if, yes, of course you can.
Because of this time of COVID and we can't go to conferences and we can't look at the portfolios, I know BCG has made an effort to add some more work products to their website also.
They have
examples of different elements of the portfolio. So you might want to take a look at that.
Right. They just
offered scholarships to 4 institutes also.
They did too. They did. The only thing I was going to, one little caution about the examples is that the writing examples are are the NGSQ, are their articles, and they're
A lot
not.
of them are, yeah.
And so sometimes it's hard to look at those. They're not quite what your narrative would be if you were writing it for the portfolio. And so I'm hoping that maybe they'll understand that and stick some of those up there. You can always hope, right? And
Yeah,
so,
because in an edited journal,
yes,
the
it's so
page real
different.
estate is
Yeah.
is
So it's different.
very valuable, and so they will
Yeah.
cut out some things in an article that
Exactly. So,
could
but
should be in a portfolio.
But, you know, when those conferences start, you know, going again, hopefully they will, that they will, you can get out there and you can start looking at them in person, and that will help you as well. So with that, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Mary, thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise and your journey with getting your certification. We
Thank you,
appreciate
everybody.
that. And we will, sorry, everybody, round of applause for Mary. We will see you next time on GenFriends. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.